Solving absolute value equations, day 3. Again, we're given an absolute value equation. Absolute value of x squared minus 2x is equal to 1. This involves a quadratic equation. So again, I want to set up my two cases. This whole expression inside here could end up to be a positive, or it could end up to be a negative. So we had to consider those two cases. So case 1, I'm going to say this whole thing is positive. So technically I don't really need to, that positive is not going to change anything there. And what I end up with is a quadratic equation. How do you solve a quadratic equation? We want to make our equation equal to 0. And then we need to solve this. Well, our first step is to see if this can be factored. And there is no values of -1 that will ever add together to give me -2. So I have to use quadratic formula here. So x equals positive b. Just write out the quadratic formula here, just for reference. B squared minus 4ac, all divided by 2a. So a negative b becomes a positive 2, plus or minus the square root of -2 squared minus 4 times 1 times a -1, all divided by 2 times 1. Well, when this is all simplified, I end up with a root 8 in my radical. Remember, I need to simplify this radical. And when I simplify this, I end up with a 2 plus or minus 2 root 2 all over 2. All of these whole numbers can be divided by 2. So I'm left with just 1 plus or minus root 2. Okay. This is my answers, but now I have to check both of these answers to the original question. So my suggestion is that you store these answers into your calculator and use them as a check. So if you can't remember how to do that, on your calculator, I'm going to take 1 plus the square root of 2, and then I'm going to hit my store button, and I'm going to save this as alpha A, and then hit enter. All right, so now I want to check this answer. So to check this answer, I'm going to take the absolute value of, if we were to write this approximation, this is 2.41 is my approximation, and the other solution is a -0.41 as an approximation. So I'm going to check this as 2.41 squared minus 2 times 2.41. When I take the absolute value of that, it should all equal 1. So to check this, because I've stored this as an A, I'm going to press alpha A. I'm going to square that. I'm going to subtract 2 and multiply it by alpha A again. So what ends up is just a 1. So this would be the absolute value of 1 is equal to 1. And obviously this is going to check out. So this 1 plus root 2 checks out. Now I need to check the 1 minus root 2. So my second check, I'm taking the absolute value of -0.41 squared minus 2 times a -0.41. This should check out to be 1 as well. So I'm going to store this as b in my calculator. So I'm going to go 1 minus the square root of 2. I'm going to store this as b. Now I'm going to check this. So I'm going to go b squared minus 2 times b. And this also checks out to be a value of 1. So both of these values check out. I'm going to go back here and box off, highlight both of those answers. All right, so that is just the case when it's positive. So now we need to do a second case when this is negative. So case 2 now, I'm going to make the entire expression inside my absolute value sign a negative. I'm going to run that through my brackets to be a -x squared plus 2x minus equals 1. Again, I get a quadratic equation. I need to make this equal to 0. Because this is negative on this side, I'm going to move everything to the right side of my equation just so that those values become positive. or the x squared becomes positive. Okay, and then I'm going to look at this. Can this be factored? Yes. The factors of positive 1 that add to a negative 2 would be x minus 1, x minus 1. My solution here would be just 1. Again, I'm going to do a quick check. Absolute value of 1 squared minus 2 times 1 should equal 1. 1 squared minus 2, well, this is going to give me a negative 1. But when I take the absolute value of negative 1, it ends up to be a positive. So this also checks out. So everything here, all three of my answers, check out. Okay. Another way you can check this is, remember, when you're solving equations, you're technically finding the x-intercepts of your function, or finding the values when this is equal to this. Okay, so if you want, on your calculators, in your y equals, if you take the absolute value, so if you go into math, into number, this ABS, I'm going to take the absolute value of my function, which is x squared minus 2x, and then I want all of this to equal 1. So when I graph this, we should technically see 3 points where these two functions are going to, or these two lines are going to intersect. So when I graph this, okay, so I'm just going to change my window slightly just so I can see this graph a little bit better. So I'm going to change these to, let's say, negative 2 to, let's say, a 4, just so I can clearly see. All right, so here's my quadratic. It crosses at 1 here, which is 1 point. It crosses at the vertex point, which is at that x equals 1, is my second solution, and then here is my third solution. So you can clearly see that this has 3 solutions to the function. Okay, and you could check those solutions by finding these intersection points. So, and this would be a second way to check your answers instead of checking them algebraically. If you press second trace and go to number 5 for intersect, I'm going to scroll over here. I'll just do one of them for you. I'm going to hit enter for my first curve. The graph automatically takes you to this second curve. I'm going to hit enter again, and then I hit enter again just to skip this guess, and it gives me that negative 0.41, which was one of my solutions here. Now, you can't solve all these values on your calculator because I want your answers as an exact value, but remember, this is an approximation value, which is what your calculator gives you. Okay, so that would be a second way to check to make sure your answers are correct. Graph the left side in y1, graph the right side in y2, and find all of those intersection points. So this is solving absolute value equations.